Hi everyone! Today we're going to go over the supply list for my Quilting with Your Walking Foot class. So first of all, obviously you'll need your sewing machine and everything to make it run. A rotary cutter. If you get your samples all cut ahead of time, you won't need your rotary cutter until the end to square up your samples. Some scissors. We always need scissors. Quilting thread. In some color that will contrast with the fabric that you pick. We'll go over that a little bit more. Seam ripper. We always need our seam ripper, right? Hopefully you won't need that too much. The book. This is the book we'll be going through. That is a requirement for the class, and we'll be working through some of the samples in here. You'll need some fabric, and I'm going to go through this stack of fabric and talk about what's a good choice and what's not so good choice for your samples. Some batting. This is a great time to use up some of your smaller pieces of batting also. And quilting gloves. These are my quilting gloves. Quilting gloves have, this is just one style. These are machine gers. And you could tell they have been used. They have little rubber ends on the fingers to give you some grip when you're quilting with your on your fabric. There's other styles, so you don't have to use those exact ones. Painter's tape. The book talks about using painter's tape for marking, so we will experiment with that a little bit. See if you like it or not. Some people do, some people don't. Friction pen, and we'll talk about specifically which ones you're going to want something that contrasts with your fabric. So actually what I have here, let me get my book out of the way. I have a whole variety here. So this is not a friction pen. This is an air erase pen. If you're going to be using your sample right away, that's not a bad choice. You just have to wait for the marks to erase on their own. This is a water erase pen. This is not a good choice for your samples because you don't want to wash your samples to get your marks out. These are friction pens, and as a little tip, notice I've wrapped the barrel of these with blue tape. That's to easily distinguish a friction pen from a regular pen. So for example, these two pens look very similar, and you could easily mistake this for just a red ink pen, whereas this really is an ink pen. So I have wrapped all my friction pens with just a little bit of tape to mark them. So not the ink pen. And then you might want a couple different colors because some colors are going to show up better on your fabric than others. So you just might want to have some variety there. All right. And what else? A double needle. Let's talk about other needles too. So here's some needles. I usually will quilt with either an 80 or a 90 quilting needle. That's just my choice. If you look at the top of the King Tut thread, it will tell you to use a top stitch 90 needle. So that's okay too. I have a 90 top stitch needle. This is a double needle. Definitely not required for class, but you may want to play with a double needle if you haven't ever used one before. This one happens to be a 3.0 90. 90 is the size of the needles. The 3.0 is the distance between the two needles. So they come in a lot of different varieties and sizes. And of course you'll need your walking foot and the guide and a ruler. Actually, a variety of rulers. This one, let's get this stuff out of the way. This one is a 1 inch by 12 Creative Grids ruler. If you have one of these, it will be very helpful for some of our marking that we're going to do. And otherwise, some type of small square would be kind of nice. Not quite as bulky as a large square. But you will also need some kind of ruler that has a 45-degree line on it. So this one is 6.5 by 12.5, and there's a 45-degree line here. This is a little bit bigger one. It doesn't have to be square to be useful. And then here's another style. This is a much bigger one. A little bulkier to use, but it does have our 45-degree line on here. So you're just going to need something a little bit bigger that has a 45-degree line on it. Something that's easy to handle. And then some type of long, skinny ruler. The reason this one is really nice is because we can get a 1/2 inch away from that center line for some of our marking. Okay, let's talk about some fabric selections. Let's clean up a little bit. All right, so you're going to want fabric that is very close to being tone on tone. When I first made samples, I used this, looked to me to be a low volume color of fabric, and then I used green thread. Did not show up as strongly as I thought it would, and I used just my regular beige in the bobbin. The beige actually showed up better than the green. So on my second go around, I chose a much lower volume background print and a much brighter, more intense thread color so that my samples will show up more than the last batch. So let's look through these fabrics. This would be a good choice. Nice low volume, tone on tone. This one would be a good choice. This one, not so much. It's just got too much going on. This one also has a lot of print in it. Probably not the best choice. This one would be a good choice. This one, even though it has a print on it, would still be a pretty good choice because they're very close in value. This one has too much print going on, and there's 3 different colors of it here. But what I wanted to show you is that you could use this fabric on the wrong side. Somebody told me one time that you paid for both sides of that fabric. You can use whatever side you want. So on the other side, this would be a good choice. This one, very pretty, too much going on. Not a good choice. This one, way too much going on. Your samples are not going to show up well on that at all. This one would be a very good choice. It's a batik and it's very light in color, like a white on cream. This one also would be a good choice. This one would be a good choice. This would not be my first choice. It doesn't have a whole lot going on, but enough pattern going on that the samples may not show up as well on this as it would on some of the other fabric. This one would be a very good choice. Again, not the first choice. It's still all blue, but there's a lot of variation going on there, a lot of print in there that would not be my first choice. And this one, very cute with little hearts, also not my first choice. So now let's look at some threads that we might use with these fabrics. So I got a box of threads here. So we just want something that's high contrast. Obviously not that one. That one would be nice. You could do a variegated. The pink is probably a little too light compared to that. You're going to want your thread to show up against your fabric. Let's look at the pink. What about the pink? Now the cream would be nice on the pink. That would be an okay choice. Purple is probably a little too close in value. The blue might be okay. But in this case, I would probably go with the highest contrast that you can get. All right, how about the yellow? Okay, not that one. That dark purple would be really pretty. This one, it's a very pretty variegated, but the light color on the variegated thread is too close to this color. So this would not be one that I chose with this fabric. That one would be okay. Again, though, it's got some light colors in the thread. This is going to be a better choice. That blue would be okay too. With the cream, pretty much anything except the cream is going to be okay. And that pink is going to be too light. That pink would be nice. Again, that dark purple. The yellow would probably not be my first choice. It's a little too light. Again, you just want that real high contrast of thread on your samples. That would be good. Again, that dark purple. And the variegated threads are fun to use on here. Now, this one would be probably okay, although, again, that light color might blend in with that light on there a little too much. I'm really liking that dark purple for everything, aren't I? Oh, that pink would go good. Not my first choice. This is very pretty, but it's got some green in it. So that would Probably not be the best choice. On the blue, that yellow would be pretty on the blue. Too close in color. Pink would be good. Let's see, what about our light pink? Probably a little too light. On the brown, again, probably a little too light. That purple is just going with everything I picked, isn't it? Let's try this one. I would probably go again with one of these real intense colors. You just want to make sure that you have that high contrast on your samples. All right, now I'm going to show you how to prepare your samples for class. So I picked this chunk of fabric because it's big enough to cut a strip, but small enough that I can work with it in this amount of space without too much trouble. So obviously the first thing I would do would be to press this. I don't like to cut my fabric when it's not pressed. And then you don't have to have perfect samples, but if you fold it in half and then fold it in half again, straighten up this side, and then, let's see here, we can just do this real quick. We'll straighten up one side. And then cut a 9-inch strip. Oh, this is an 8.5-inch ruler. I've got to get something a little bigger. All right. You can cut a 9-inch strip, somewhat straight. Doesn't have to be perfect again. And then you can take this piece, cut it on the fold, and cut it on the fold. And I can just do that with the rotary cutter. It doesn't even have to be perfectly straight. Once you stitch out your samples, you're going to trim them down to fit your page anyway. And I left the salvages on mine just, well, for one thing, I think they're kind of interesting, but also just because it doesn't hurt anything to have them on the sample, and it gave me a little extra space to sew on. All right, so I now have 4 pieces of fabric here that are roughly 9 by 11. This is enough to make 2 samples because I'm going to use one on the bottom, put my batting in there. Again, I would trim this batting to 9 by 11-ish. Put this on here, and that's my first sample. All right, so let's take this and trim it down to the right size. 9 by 11. And again, I don't really care if it's a little bit wavy down here. It'll be just fine for our samples. And again, this is all wrinkly, so I would have pressed it before I cut it. One on the top, one on the bottom. If you don't feel like your fabric is sticking to your batting, you can use just a little touch of basting spray or a safety pin. Because our samples are so small, I find that the fabric sticks to the batting quite well. They certainly don't all have to be the same batting. This is a great time to use up your scraps. So I hope that helps you get ready for class. I'll see you soon.